All right, it is time to talk about a sci-fi, fantasy, and weird fiction title with Ready Player One. Hey everyone, it is Shannon, and I'm excited to share my thoughts on Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. This is the 11th title, yes, 11th title in my sci-fi, fantasy, and weird fiction extravaganza. It was written in 2011, which makes it one of the most recent titles on my list. And it is a standalone novel, which is really exciting because there's only so many series one person can read. Actually, for this year, I think I'm actually going to focus on reading fantasy series. So most of the sci-fi and weird titles that I'm going to be talking about will be standalones, and then after this year I'll reassess and then maybe do sci-fi series, because series take a long time to read. And I want to stay in the world, especially if it's, there's a fair amount of books. Okay, off topic already. Let's get back to it. Okay, so this one is challenging to talk about it. I'm just going to say that straight up, because I really went in with the expectation of really enjoying this book. It starts with, it has a young protagonist, and it's set in the near future economic collapse time period where most people escape to or work in a place called Oasis, which is a virtual reality slash simulation kind of thing. You put on a visor and gloves and there you go. You're not moving your body, but I guess you move your hands. But anyway, but you're in a simulated world. And so I like stuff about gaming, and it also has tons of 80s nostalgia. I was like, that's awesome, perfect. I'm looking forward to checking that out. But as I started reading it, I was like, actually, it took me a while. I was initially really engaged, curious about the story. A lot of the big plot of it is that there's this sort of game within the virtual reality, a game within Oasis, that whoever wins will win the fortune of the creator of Oasis, and it is a huge amount. It's just an insurmountable, like just nothing. Like, this is a time when people do not have any money, so this is like independent freedom for like your entire lineage if you win it, kind of big. So we follow Wade, who wants to figure this out. One of the ways people work on figuring this out is going through all of this 80s nostalgia stuff, because the creator grew up during the 80s and he loves the 80s, and he left this sort of hint book, a very vague hint book behind, of references of some of his favorite things. So people spend their time watching like 80s movies and TV shows and playing old games and stuff like this, hoping to find some element that will help them figure out what to do in this world to start the sort of game within the simulation kind of thing. So I don't want to talk too much about that because, spoilers, so I'm not going to talk about that, but just about the book. And it's weird because one of the big draws of it was the whole 80s thing, and I thought that would be a lot of fun. For me, that time period, I lived through it, so I know all of the references pretty much that he's talking about. And initially it started off as really fun and like, oh yeah, and I remember that, and oh yeah, that was really like this and all that kind of stuff. But eventually it just became like a ridiculous amount of description, and references over and over and over again that didn't really have that much meaning, and just like how many hours it took Wade to master that particular game, and which things he liked to watch when he wasn't, when he was feeling down, or how many times he had seen this Family Ties episode or whatever. And it's just like at some point I'm just like, wow, like it doesn't have any, it could have relevance to the game, the quest, the that thing, but I can't remember if it has a name. But like, it's just like, it was just, to me, it just felt like superfluous description, just more description. It lost meaning. It literally lost meaning. I was just waiting for them to be done with talking about how many times this, how many times that, because it didn't have much more than that, like much more, like if it talked about how much, this particular episode of whatever show was really, I don't know, made him think of something else, or made him wish he had that life, or whatever, or something more tangible, something more like heartfelt, that would be one thing. But it wasn't. It was just numbers. It was just statistics. So that made it really cold and just uninteresting. So yeah, and that's part of, I think, a larger problem I had with the book, is I didn't connect to Wade as a character. I just didn't feel that emotional connection. I felt like I should be cheering him on. It's, like in some ways it's like, you got to feel like you have all the odds against you. But in some ways, considering where the world's at, most people have all the odds against him. It's not just him, and he elects to be a gunter, which is sort of a solo hunter, and they have this sort of moral code that they don't accept or give help for anything that they learn about the game or like any hints that they have. So, and then there's like a corporation that sort of binds together, and a conglomerate that is working towards trying to solve the game as well. And so those are the two sides, but I didn't feel like there was much of a connection. So that made it really hard to cheer Wade on. And I don't know, like I really wish I had loved this one, and but I just didn't. I really didn't. And I don't think it was like terribly written or anything. Although one thing that is kind of strange is I found it in the teen section of the library, and definitely I noted on Goodreads a lot of people did mark it as YA, but given the 80s nostalgia factor, the age group for this is really 35 to 50. Like that is who is going to get all these references. I don't know if younger readers would either get or be interested in that many references for a time period that they didn't live through. Now with the age of internet and access, you can go and watch all this stuff, which is weird because like at the time, if you missed that Family Ties episode, you were out of luck. Like maybe you'd see it one day in syndication or whatever. Or sometimes you only saw stuff in syndication. So you never saw things in order, which is something very different to how we watch TV now. So yeah, I don't know. Like it just really wasn't connecting with me very much at all. I am still interested in the book to film adaptation. It is coming out, I believe, early next year. I think the people involved are going to do a great job. It really lends itself to film without question. But I would hesitate. I would recommend not, if you haven't read the book, I would hesitate not. I would recommend not looking at the casting because so much of it takes place in a simulated world. And Wade, you can represent yourself in any which way you want, depending on if you have like in-game currency. And then there's a whole commentary on that because it kind of feels like free-to-play games, right? Because they're free to play. Oasis is free to go into, but then what you can do in there depends on how much in-game currency you have. So there, even though it is a whole different sort of society within society, it actually has a lot of the same structure and problems. So, but as anyone can represent themselves in any way that they want. Therefore, I would recommend not looking at the casting because of that. So anyway, I gotta say, I'm sad about this one, but what can you do other than go on to the next one? And for the sci-fi, fantasy, and weird extravaganza, my next book will be Brown Girl in the Ring, and it is a Toronto set dystopia with magical realism elements. It was pretty crazy. And yeah, so I'm going to do a few things for the spoiler zone for those of us who have read the book or don't care about knowing, and I will talk about the end, so just be forewarned. But until next time, for the folks that have seen it, haven't read it, and don't want spoilers, I will see you later. Otherwise, on to the spoiler zone! I feel like I should have music or something, but I don't. Yeah, okay, so there were a few things that really bothered me and with the book, and one of the big ones was that Wade didn't have he didn't have a big reaction to when his aunt died. And that was when, for me, I started, I think, to dip down in my interest in the book and the character because, like, it was his last sort of living relative, I think, and she's gone, and he's like, oh, okay, I gotta, like, figure stuff out, okay. And he just goes on to the next thing. He does have remorse and does feel badly for his neighbor, who also dies, but just it was hard to cheer on a character who felt so disconnected. And I can understand if it's sort of like an analogy of the simulated world, like and spending that much time there. Maybe, I don't know. He has some friends in there, one friend in there really too. So I don't know. that wasn't working for me. I also wasn't that convinced that he would be so adept at working in like the real world, because we only see him in the simulated world, but he's able to sort of like negotiate stuff and travel, and it's things that he hasn't done before, and evade, people finding him, or getting away from people looking for him, and and like having all this confidence and no experience. Nothing would indicate that he would have the capacity to do the things that he's doing. So that was weird. And also I feel, for me, actually, a lot of it, the crux of my problem with the book is that I feel like it goes back on its own moral code, because the Gunters have this moral code of, we do it on our own, we're not going to accept help from other people. That is it, and then in the end, he actually not only accepts, but sets up, working together with his friends for sort of like the final battle type thing, and getting outside help from someone else who's got like uber resources and stuff like that. And I'm like, why? Why is that okay? Why is that okay? Everyone said that that's not how you're going to do this. It's not how you're going to go down. And I understand the Sixers, the corporation, have like a vast amount of resources, but it kind of felt like, hey, if they're going to do it, we can do it too. And it's just like, wow, it felt so playground. Like it felt so, you know, I don't know. I guess going back on its own moral code is the problem that I had with that. And as it turns out, he ends up with this uber power, and or not only before that, he ends up with this sort of one random side quest. He ended up having the one magical item that he needed to keep going when no one else could. And I'm like, wow. And that happens in stories. Like, that literally has happened. I can name at least 2 fantasy series off the top of my head where that happens. And so I know that we tend to see this in stories, in epic hero stories, and I know that it actually can be the truth. One random fact that you remembered or put in your bag was what got you through whatever circumstances. I'm not saying it doesn't happen or doesn't happen in stories, but it just bothered me this time so much because, and I guess as the protagonist, we anticipate that he's going to be the one, but he didn't feel like the one, like in terms of the stories that focus on the one, like Ender's Game or The Matrix, where the character is like that. And I didn't feel like he was. I didn't understand why he was so special, or why he had the capacity. I wasn't feeling that. And that feels a bit rude to say, but just, other than the fact that we were following him, I didn't see why he was any more adept than the other people that were on his not Gunter team, like, why would he have won, other than the fact that he was the protagonist, and can't have a girl win. So there's that. It's like total BS. It's totally, when I realized that afterwards, like the reasons why the 2 girls didn't win, I was like, that they are just as capable as he was. So yeah, but it took me a while to sort of put that into play. Anyway, so, and that's a huge spoiler for folks, so I'm sorry, but I did warn you. Yeah, so the solo versus team thing, that bothered me. The uber power bothered me. Being able to resurrect his friends in a game where you only have one life bothered me. It just mean like everything they set up of saying like this was an unbreakable thing, or whether it's the game mechanics versus, what he personally or philosophically believes, and then they break it, and that bothers me. And I understand when there's like that can have a really powerful impact, right, because you don't expect it because it's been set up this way. But it also really bothers me because it's like, well, now why, like, he can do anything, and that's, I guess, his reward for winning, but now I don't even care, and ironically he ends up not wanting to be in game anymore. Which I think there is a moral, like a sort of moral of the story is, which I get, although I don't know if I believe that the creator would have that message. So I felt like there were a lot of quizzical moments as the story went on. So anyway, let me know your thoughts. Did you enjoy Ready Player One? Did you have any of the same problems that I had with it? Are you looking forward to the film? I'm still really looking forward to the film. I think it'll be a great film. I think it's Steven Spielberg that is involved, which is perfect. Like, he just does 80s. He's been doing it since the 80s. and he gets it. He gets it. He'll get that perfectly, I think. So I think we're in for a treat there, even though reading it was not such a treat. So, oh well, on to the next book. Thanks for watching.